One day, Koshi, a young boy, found himself inside a women's dormitory. He was completely shocked after accidentally encountering several girls relaxing together in the bath area. Before that moment, Koshi's home had burned down and his father chose to leave town. Since then, 12-year-old Koshi had been forced to live on the streets and nearly starved. After eating food scraps he found on the ground, he suffered from severe stomach problems. Suddenly, a woman approached him and warned that searching for food that way was dangerous. She asked what kind of food he wanted to eat, explaining that she was a researcher and wanted to use the information as future reference. Distracted by something he noticed nearby, Koshi accidentally gave an embarrassing and unrelated answer, which surprised the woman. Her name was Mineru. Feeling concerned for him, she brought Koshi to a women's dormitory and gave him a proper meal. Koshi ate eagerly, clearly exhausted from hunger. Mineru jokingly apologized for not being able to provide everything he had mentioned earlier, which left Koshi visibly embarrassed. Noticing how dirty he looked, Mineru suggested that he take a bath first. She wiped the remaining food from his face in a caring, but overly casual way, making Koshi blush before he hurried toward the bathroom. Koshi did not fully understand where he was. Without thinking much about it, he entered the bath area, only to freeze in shock when he realized that 3 girls were already bathing there. They were Kiriya, Frey, and Serene. His face immediately turned bright red from embarrassment. The girls did not know who he was either. Frey reacted with playful curiosity, which only made Koshi panic even more and shout loudly. His scream echoed throughout the dormitory. At that moment, Athena had just returned home and wondered about the strange noise she had heard. She entered the building and was soon greeted by Mineru. While asking who was using the bath, Athena suddenly saw Koshi running out in a panic without realizing his situation. By accident, Koshi collided with Athena, causing both of them to fall. When he opened his eyes, he realized he had ended up in an extremely awkward position. Athena reacted in shock and Koshi quickly understood the misunderstanding. His face flushed as he immediately apologized repeatedly. Frey and Kiriya restrained him at first, believing he had behaved inappropriately. But Koshi firmly explained that everything had been a complete accident. Serene suggested that they discuss the situation later because Athena was not feeling well after the sudden incident and needed time to recover. The place turned out to be the goddess dormitory at Seikon Women's University. Mineru introduced herself as the temporary dorm mother while also being a 4th-year university student. Koshi introduced himself and explained that he was still a first-year middle school student. One by one, the residents introduced themselves as well. Kiriya was a 2nd-year university student, Frey was in her 3rd year, and Serene admitted she had stayed at the dorm for so long that she barely remembered when she first arrived. Koshi sincerely apologized again for the earlier misunderstanding. The girls did not hold it against him and instead became curious about how Mineru had met him. Koshi revealed that he had no money, no family to rely on, and no place to live. They were shocked to learn how difficult his situation truly was. Koshi wanted to continue attending middle school while finding work, but doing so seemed impossible without a home. Mineru then offered him a job at the dormitory as the dorm manager, since the position was currently vacant. She explained that the role included a private room, living accommodations, and a monthly cash salary. There were no strict requirements or age restrictions for applicants. Hearing this, Koshi became interested in the opportunity. However, according to Frey, there was one major problem. They needed Athena's approval. The group went to Athena's room, where Mineru introduced Koshi and explained her plan to appoint him as the new dorm manager. Unfortunately, Athena firmly rejected the idea, believing that a boy could not possibly take on that role. After stating her objection, she chose to leave the dormitory for the time being. Mineru had already expected Athena's reaction. Athena was a first-year university student who had recently transferred from another dorm. Most members of Athena's family were women, and she had grown up in a very sheltered environment, even attending an all-girls high school. Her previous dormitory experience had been stressful because some residents often invited their boyfriends into their rooms. One day, Athena accidentally witnessed an intimate situation between her roommate and a male guest, which shocked her so much that she fainted. Since then, Athena had felt extremely uncomfortable around men. Koshi wondered why Mineru would still offer him the job knowing this. Mineru believed there might be a solution that could benefit everyone. She hoped Athena could gradually become more comfortable interacting with men, since Athena often felt unwell whenever she encountered one. Even so, no one knew what the right solution was. In the end, Koshi suddenly refused the offer. He did not want to take away someone else's sense of home or cause trouble for the people living there. Koshi ran outside to chase after Athena, but she only ran faster. Before long, he managed to catch up with her. Athena admitted that she had not run like that since leaving her previous dorm, explaining that she had only been trying to protect herself. Koshi told her that the decision was hers to make, and he revealed that he had already turned down Mineru's offer to become the dorm mother. He asked Athena to return to the dormitory because it was her home, not his. Koshi added that living without a home was incredibly difficult. Hearing that made Athena feel guilty. Even though Koschei had been protecting her, she realized she had been acting selfishly and thinking only about herself. That night, Koschei sat quietly on a park bench, shivering in the cold. He felt relieved knowing that Athena did not have to experience something like that. Not long after, he fell asleep. Athena suddenly appeared, unable to leave him alone after hearing his words earlier. She gently carried Koschei and brought him back toward the dormitory. When Koschei woke up, he found himself safe and warm, surrounded by a pleasant scent. By accident, he moved awkwardly while half asleep and startled Athena, causing both of them to panic. Athena, who was still uncomfortable around men, became overwhelmed and fainted shortly afterward. Koschei quickly carried her back to the dorm. Mineru and the others were already waiting there. Mineru looked happy to see that Koschei had finally returned. Koschei believed that Athena must have been trying hard to overcome her fears. Not wanting to disappoint her, he promised himself that he would do his best as the dorm mother. He wondered whether Athena would forgive him. According to Kiria and Frey, Athena would surely forgive him since she had gone out herself to look for him. Koschei felt genuinely happy knowing that everyone in the dorm relied on him so much. One day, while Koschei was sweeping the dorm courtyard, he overheard two girls talking about how the dormitory had a troublesome reputation. Curious, he wondered why they described it that way. He pushed aside any negative thoughts, reminding himself that regardless of its reputation, Mineru and the others had given him both a job and a place to live. Because of that kindness, he was determined to work hard as the dorm mother to repay them. Soon after, more girls passed by and continued discussing the dorm's reputation, which motivated Koschei to clean even more enthusiastically. When he went upstairs to clean the second floor, he was surprised by how messy it was. He could not understand how it had become so dirty, especially since the area in front of Athena's room looked perfectly clean. Athena was attending her Saturday makeup class at the time, leaving the dorm unusually quiet without her presence. Koschei began collecting the trash and rang Mineru's doorbell. Suddenly, a loud warning alarm sounded, startling him and making him panic. Mineru quickly opened the door and turned off the alarm. Koschei was caught off guard by her casual appearance and immediately looked away in embarrassment, wondering why she seemed so unconcerned. Mineru calmly explained that she was used to working that way, saying that comfort and freedom of movement helped her focus on her research experiments. Koschei nervously asked her to dress more appropriately, then hurried to the next room. He announced that starting that day, he would collect everyone's trash every morning and politely hoped Mineru would be properly dressed when he came by. Koschei did not expect that cleaning just one room would already leave him exhausted. He figured he would need time to adjust, remembering that people often said residents tended to relax more casually at home. Suddenly, Frey grabbed his hand and pulled him into her room. She immediately began dressing him in a costume she had made herself. Koschei protested, saying he still needed to clean the second floor, but Frey insisted that spending time with the residents was also part of a dorm mother's duties. Frey was a passionate cosplay enthusiast who handcrafted her own costumes. She loved styling other people and had long been searching for a male model to showcase her creations. She explained that whenever she saw someone with well-balanced proportions, she felt inspired to match them with the perfect outfit, regardless of whether the person was male or female. Frey reassured him that he did not need to worry because no one else would see them there. Koschei realized that Frey was very different from Athena, yet it seemed clear that Frey also carried her own personal struggles. Frey suddenly asked Koschei to help her take some body measurements. Without showing any hesitation, she began changing her outfit in front of him so the measurements would be easier to take. Koschei was caught completely off guard by the situation. Frey then asked him to measure her chest, hips, and waist. At first he refused, feeling uncomfortable, but Frey explained that assisting the dorm residents was also part of his responsibilities as the dorm mother. With no real way to decline, Koschei reluctantly agreed. Koschei's face turned bright red as he tried to focus on the task, especially since Frey was standing very close to him. Feeling overwhelmed, he attempted to step away, convinced he could not handle the situation properly. Unfortunately, the measuring tape was still wrapped around Frey, causing her to lose balance and stumble toward him. From an outside perspective, their positions looked extremely awkward and easy to misunderstand. Frey smiled playfully and wondered whether Koschei had done it on purpose, joking that kids these days seemed surprisingly bold. Embarrassed beyond words, Koschei shouted loudly just as the alarm from Mineru's room suddenly rang. Mineru quickly rushed out and opened Frey's door, announcing that toxic smoke was spreading because her latest experiment had failed. She immediately pushed both Koschei and Frey outside the building for safety. Koschei worried that letting the smoke drift outside might cause problems, but Mineru casually mentioned that she had never faced any complaints about it before. Fortunately, the other residents were away from the dorm at the time. Koschei was surprised by how calm they seemed, only to learn that incidents like this happened quite often. Frey explained that Mineru was famously known as a walking smoke generator, while she herself was jokingly called a walking fashion demon. Hearing that, Koschei began to wonder if those habits were the reason the dorm had such a troubled reputation. They had no choice but to wait outside until the smoke cleared. though the cold weather made the wait uncomfortable. Koshi could not understand how they could remain so relaxed without worrying about potential danger. Mineru reassured him that no one had ever been hurt and that everything always turned out fine because situations like this were normal for them. From Koshi's perspective, however, it still caused inconvenience to others, and he believed they should be more careful and show some responsibility. Hearing his honest concern, both Mineru and Frey apologized to him. Koshi immediately felt guilty for raising his voice and ran off after apologizing himself, even though neither of them had been upset with him. He blamed himself for lecturing people who had given him a place to stay, especially since they were older than him. Not long afterward, several passersby began taking photos of Koshi because he was still wearing a costume at the time. He repeatedly asked them to stop, feeling extremely embarrassed. Meanwhile, Mineru reflected that being scolded might actually be helpful for personal growth, and Frey agreed. Frey commented that Mineru had found a genuinely kind person in Koshi. As the cold weather continued to bother them, Koshi soon returned carrying blankets. Mineru asked where he had gotten them, and Koshi explained that he had learned a few survival tricks during the time he spent living on the streets. Mineru acknowledged that it must have been difficult. Koshi admitted that, as a boy, he wanted to do what he believed a dependable man should do while also fulfilling his role as the dorm mother. Hearing that, Mineru and Frey smiled warmly. Everyone already knew their dorm had many problems and that its residents were rather unusual, so Frey asked Koshi to be patient with them. He agreed without hesitation. Both Frey and Mineru hugged him gratefully, and at that exact moment, Athena arrived and was shocked by what she saw. That night, Athena gave everyone a serious lecture. She believed they should live healthier lives with proper discipline and routines. She could not understand why some residents casually wandered around outside the dorm dressed carelessly, especially now that Koshi was living there. She did not want him to be influenced in a negative way. Athena firmly declared that she would begin correcting what she considered improper behavior starting that day. When Mineru attempted to demonstrate something inappropriate as a joke, Athena quickly covered her using a device she had prepared earlier called the Fuki Memoru. Unexpectedly, the others began jokingly going along with the situation, making Athena struggle to keep everything under control. Watching the chaotic scene unfold, Koshi laughed and realized that the dorm was not such a bad place after all. In fact, he felt grateful to be living there. At the Seikon Women's University Goddess Dormitory, the building had 2 floors. Koshi's room was located on the first floor and used traditional tatami mats. After his house burned down, he had never imagined that he would once again be able to sleep on a warm futon. He felt deeply grateful to Mineru and everyone else who had taken him in. One day, Mineru was busy creating a special experimental potion. She thought that testing it only on women would not be very interesting, and fortunately, she already had a test subject living in the dormitory. At the same time, Koshi was feeling cold and planned to go to bed early that night. Elsewhere, Frey had just finished making a costume she designed herself. She felt confident that the outfit would suit Koshi perfectly. That night, the air felt unusually cold, making it difficult for Koshi to fall asleep. Athena remained determined to uphold proper morals and order within the dormitory as she always did. While Koshi lay awake, he suddenly heard loud noises coming from the ceiling. Kiria's room was directly above his. Not long afterward, part of the ceiling broke and Kiria suddenly fell through into Koshi's room. The floor in her room had been damaged, forcing her to drop down unexpectedly. Koshi tried to catch her, but he lost his balance because he could not support the impact. The awkward fall left both of them stunned, and Koshi struggled to breathe for a moment after the collision. Later that night, Kiria apologized repeatedly and promised she would repair the damage. Koshi wondered how the ceiling could have broken so suddenly. Kiria explained that the story was complicated and difficult to explain. She quickly hid a book she had been holding. Koshi reassured her that there was no need to feel embarrassed just because she enjoyed reading shoujo manga. Kiria then explained that her parents owned a martial arts studio near their home, where she had trained since childhood. Growing up surrounded by many brothers, she had been raised in a very energetic and physically active environment. When she entered college, she bought a shoujo manga for the first time. She had been surprised to discover such a sweet and sparkling fictional world, and she quickly became hooked on it. While reading an emotional romantic scene between the main characters, she became so absorbed in the story that she accidentally damaged part of her room. At that moment, Koshi finally understood how the floor had broken and why she had fallen into his room. Kiria admitted that she sometimes became overly animated when excited, especially while reading stories she enjoyed. She apologized again and promised to fix the wall and ceiling. Koshi told her not to worry too much about it. Unexpectedly, Kiria then asked for permission to sleep in his room that night. She was worried she might fall again since she tended to move around a lot in her sleep. Koshi became visibly nervous and asked whether she felt uncomfortable sharing a room with a boy. Kiria casually replied that it did not bother her because she had grown up sharing space with her brothers. Koshi found her reasoning difficult to fully understand. After Koshie agreed, Kireya invited him to stay awake a little longer and talk with her. He was surprised, considering she needed to wake up early the next morning, but she only wanted a short conversation. Kireya mentioned that Koshie reminded her of her younger brother back home. Suddenly, she grabbed his arm and playfully demonstrated a practice hold she used during training, unintentionally causing Koshie to cry out in discomfort. She explained that she and her younger brother often practiced sparring together like that, and the moment made her feel nostalgic. The familiar activity reminded Koshie of his own younger sibling as well. Kireya appeared cheerful and satisfied by the nostalgic feeling, while Koshie endured the lingering soreness. Noticing his reaction, she asked how he felt, and when Koshie quickly admitted defeat, she immediately released him. Once again, Kireya apologized for getting carried away. She had not meant to overwhelm someone as inexperienced as Koshie. He reassured her that he was not upset and did not take it personally. Koshie then mentioned that everyone living in the dormitory had their own unusual traits and habits, and that the residents could sometimes be unintentionally overwhelming. He also acknowledged that Kireya was incredibly strong, while Mineru and the others each had their own unique quirks. Koshie realized that everyone living in the dormitory was a beautiful young woman. Kireya might have been reminded of her younger brother when she looked at him. Even though the two of them had no actual relationship or family connection, Koshie was still a young man, and he hoped Kireya would keep that in mind. At the same time, he reflected on himself and felt that he needed to clear his thoughts and behave more maturely. Koshie soon left the room and explained that he did not mind sleeping in Kireya's room for the night. He even suggested that Kireya could use his room instead. Kireya warned him that her room was dangerous because there was a large hole in the floor, but Koshie remained confident that he would be careful. That night, Koshie noticed Kireya's faint scent lingering in the room. Thinking about it made him feel slightly awkward since he was sleeping in a girl's room for the first time. Meanwhile, Kireya found herself replaying Koshie's words in her mind. No one had ever spoken to her in that way before, and the memory made her wonder whether moments like those dramatic scenes in shoujo manga could actually happen in real life. Not long after, loud noises and scratching sounds echoed through the dorm, startling Koshie, who silently hoped his room would not end up damaged again. Later that night, Sarene came to Kireya's room intending to ask for a late-night snack, only to find it empty. She quickly assumed that Kireya had caused trouble somewhere else again. Sarene then proposed a strange deal to Koshie, saying that if he agreed to serve her, she would repair the damaged floor using what she called lunar technology. Koshie did not understand what she meant, but since fixing the floor was exactly what he needed, he asked her to go ahead if she truly could repair it. Afterward, Sarene briefly showed affection toward him before gazing quietly at the moon through the window. Koshie, already half asleep, barely registered what had happened and soon drifted off. The next morning, Kireya praised Koshie for fixing the floor so well that it looked even better than before. Koshie was confused because he did not remember repairing anything. The only thing he vaguely recalled was Sarene being in the room the previous night, which he eventually dismissed as a dream. One morning, Koshie was busy cooking in the kitchen when Athena greeted him and asked what he was doing. He explained that he was preparing vegetable soup for breakfast. Athena was surprised that he was cooking for everyone. Koshie considered it part of his responsibility as the dorm caretaker to prepare meals, even though he was only using leftover ingredients from the refrigerator. In his opinion, carrots and onions could become a nutritious and delicious broth if cooked properly. Not long afterward, Mineru and Frey joined them, drawn in by the comforting aroma that made the dorm feel unusually normal. Athena quickly tried to cover Mineru when she noticed her careless appearance, leading to a lively commotion between the two of them. Frey simply watched with an amused smile, while Koshie was surprised by how energetic they both were. Soon after, Kireya arrived and expressed amazement that Koshie could cook. Koshie humbly insisted that he was only preparing something simple and did not deserve special praise. Just as Koshie was about to taste the soup, Sarene suddenly appeared and sampled it first. She clearly enjoyed the flavor and praised the meal enthusiastically. Koshie's face turned red as he remembered the previous night, which he still believed had been a dream. When Sarene tried to take another taste directly from the pot, Koshie gently stopped her and explained that he would serve it properly in bowls. All the dorm residents gathered around the table to eat breakfast together. Mineru complimented Koshie's cooking and wanted to reward him with one of her handmade concoctions, while Frey offered to make him a new costume she had designed. Kireya even invited him to train with her after breakfast. Athena could hardly believe how quickly Koshie had grown close to everyone, especially considering he had only recently moved into the dorm. She wondered if something unusual had happened while she was away. Sarene then asked Koshie to prepare dinner later that evening. Seeing this, Athena was astonished that Koshie had managed to win over someone as unpredictable as Sarene. Koshie carefully asked whether he was truly allowed to cook dinner for everyone. Frey agreed immediately, admitting that none of them were good at cooking. Mineru mentioned that she once saw Athena working very hard in the past, which reminded everyone of how things used to be. Curious, Koshie asked what they normally ate. The residents answered in unison that they usually relied on instant food. Koshi had already expected that response. He decided to visit the supermarket and asked whether they had money set aside for daily meals. It turned out that their food budget was stored in a small piggy bank that they accessed from the back. After confirming that the money was meant for shared meals, Koshi received permission to use it and immediately headed to the supermarket. Athena felt certain that something had changed, since the dorm residents rarely trusted someone else with an important responsibility. Suddenly, she volunteered to accompany Koshi on the shopping trip. Koshi thanked her sincerely. Athena wanted to see for herself how Koshi had managed to win everyone's trust, and she remained determined to find the answer without letting her guard down. Suddenly, Mineru playfully pushed Koshi as a joke. The unexpected movement caused Koshi to stumble forward and bump into Athena, catching both of them off guard. Athena immediately became flustered, and her nose started bleeding from the shock. She did not dislike men, but their presence often made her extremely nervous. Mineru quickly apologized and promised not to repeat the prank again. Afterward, Koshi and Athena headed to the supermarket to do some shopping. Athena intentionally wore a mask and used a nasal plug to prevent her nosebleed from starting again. Koshi felt concerned and thought Athena did not need to help him if it caused her trouble. While shopping, Athena became startled whenever she noticed unfamiliar men nearby, instinctively staying close to Koshi for reassurance. Her anxiety caused another nosebleed despite her efforts to stay calm. Koshi thought it might be better for Athena to return home and rest. However, after replacing her nasal plug, she insisted on continuing to accompany him, even if she had to move carefully and avoid attention. In the end, they successfully finished their shopping together. Koshi praised Athena for being brave. He believed most people would run away from situations that made them uncomfortable, but Athena continued to face her fears. He remembered how, since his first day at the dormitory, Athena had already begun overcoming her anxieties. She had even helped carry him back to the dorm when he had nowhere else to go, allowing him to stay there because of her kindness. Athena reflected on that moment and realized she had acted that way because Koshi forgave her when she tried to run away earlier. His understanding allowed her to relax and gradually face both herself and others. She began to recognize how Koshi naturally earned people's trust through kindness and sincerity. Feeling embarrassed by this realization, she ran ahead, calling his behavior unfairly disarming in her own flustered way. While distracted, Athena accidentally bumped into two men standing in front of her. Panic set in when she realized she was no longer using her nasal plug. Seeing her distress, Koshi quickly supported her and guided her away from the crowded area. They stopped at an internet cafe so Athena could calm down. Athena remained quiet, which made Koshi worry that she might be upset with him. He apologized because, in the heat of the moment earlier, he had acted impulsively while helping her escape the situation. Athena reassured him that she was not bothered by it at all. What she truly wanted was for Koshi to call her his older sister. When he agreed, Athena felt incredibly happy, as if she were floating. Hearing that title gave her a warm sense of belonging, like finally having a younger brother she could care for. Although still nervous, Athena gathered her courage and gently patted Koshi's head, thanking him for protecting her. She promised that she would also protect him whenever he needed help. Shyly, she asked him to think of her as his older sister, determined to support him from then on. During their awkward moment, Athena lost her balance and stumbled, causing both of them to panic in surprise. The situation turned into an unintentionally clumsy scene, leaving them both embarrassed. After regaining their composure, they decided to head back home together. On the way back, Koshi apologized for everything that had happened that day and thanked Athena for accompanying him shopping. Athena, meanwhile, felt guilty for previously misunderstanding him. At first, she had suspected that Koshi was trying to win everyone's favor through clever tactics. However, she now realized that the dorm residents trusted him simply because they spent genuine time together, and that shared experience created real trust. Recognizing that her suspicions had been excessive, Athena sincerely apologized to him. That evening, all the dorm residents gathered for dinner. Everyone was extremely satisfied with the meal Koshi prepared, believing his cooking gave them renewed energy. Seeing everyone enjoy his food made Koshi genuinely happy. Suddenly, Mineru pulled Koshi into a playful hug and Frey moved closer to join in. Athena quickly separated them, believing their behavior was inappropriate. From that moment on, she declared that she would protect Koshi in her role as his older sister. Hearing this, the other dorm residents became interested in being called older sisters by Koshi as well, turning the moment into a lively and cheerful atmosphere at the dormitory. One day, Koshi was about to do the laundry when Mineru suddenly showed up and asked him to wash some of her clothes as well. Koshi was surprised and said that Mineru should really wash her personal clothing herself. Mineru even joked about taking off her undergarments right there, which immediately made Koshi shout and turn his face away in embarrassment. Fortunately, Mineru was only teasing him. While hanging the laundry outside, Koshi felt extremely awkward when he noticed the personal garments he had to hang up. Still, he reminded himself that taking care of the dorm chores was part of his role as the dorm mother. To make things less awkward, he covered them with other laundry so they would not be too visible. The weather that day was bright and pleasant. During Golden Week, Koshi started wondering whether the dorm residents had any special vacation plans. It had already been 2 weeks since he began living in the dorm after his house burned down, and he still had not returned there. More than anything, Koshi wanted to go back to school. He was also curious about how his friends were doing. That morning, Koshi finished preparing breakfast for the dorm residents. After that, he called them to gather. He first called Athena to come to his room. Athena asked him to repeat what he had just said when he addressed her as an older sister. With a shy expression, Koshi called her big sister again and offered her breakfast. Athena smiled and walked over to him. She apologized for making Koshi cook breakfast for her. Athena wanted to thank him by gently patting his head, but she still found it difficult to do so naturally and said she would keep trying. Koshi quickly told her that she did not need to force herself. Koshi became nervous as Athena leaned closer while talking with him. Suddenly, Frey hugged him from behind. Frey assumed that Koshi had been staring at Athena, but he immediately denied it. Frey then commented that Koshi seemed to like light and comfortable dresses and said she wanted to make one for him. Athena immediately scolded Frey for teasing Koshi in a way she considered inappropriate. Not long after that, Mineru arrived and pointed out that Athena had been the one asking Koshi to call her big sister. Soon afterward, Korea also showed up and declared that she was the one most suited to be Koshi's big sister. Since all of them wanted to be called that, Mineru suggested they hold a competition to decide who truly deserved the title. After finishing breakfast, they asked Koshi to start addressing them as big sister one by one. Koshi was confused about why he had been asked to wear such an unusual outfit for the occasion. Frey explained that older sisters often enjoy dressing up their younger brothers in fun ways. Koshi protested that the clothes he was wearing looked more like something meant for girls, but Frey insisted that it looked cute on him and suited him perfectly. She even jokingly referred to Koshi as her doll, claiming that a younger brother could be like a playmate for his older sister. Suddenly, Kireya raised a red card toward Frey, signaling that she was eliminated from the competition. Frey's attempt to trick Koshi was considered a violation of the rules. Frey then asked what Mineru planned to do. Mineru replied that she wanted Koshi to try her newest invention, since in her opinion younger brothers were perfect assistants for testing experiments. Hearing that, the others immediately gave Mineru a red card as well. Not long after, Serene arrived. Everyone became curious about what kind of impression she would show as an older sister. Serene looked at Koshi for a moment and then casually lay down with her head. Soon the room became noisy again as everyone started arguing over who should take care of Koshi. Even so, the atmosphere somehow felt warm and lively. For Koshi, the moment gave him a small glimpse of what it might feel like to have older sisters looking after him. Not long after that, Mineru arrived and told everyone that she had a surprise. She explained that once Golden Week was over, she had arranged for Koshi to return to school. Koshi was shocked and wondered how Mineru had managed to do it, especially since he believed the process of re-enrolling in school would be complicated. Mineru calmly explained that it only required signing a few documents, and Frey had also helped with the process. Koshi could hardly believe that they had managed to handle it so easily. He felt certain that the two of them must have gone through quite a bit of trouble behind the scenes. Deeply grateful, Koshi sincerely thanked both Mineru and Frey. He promised that he would work hard, both as the dormitory caretaker and as a student. At that moment, Koshi truly felt lucky. Meanwhile, Athena quietly wondered about herself. She had always liked the idea of Koshi calling her big sister, yet she felt that she had not done anything particularly reliable for him. It even surprised her that she had not thought of doing something that could truly make Koshi happy. After Golden Week ended, Koshi returned to school. He felt genuinely happy because he never expected that he would be able to attend middle school again. Suddenly, a girl rushed toward him and accidentally bumped into him, startling him as she demanded to know where he had been all this time. The girl's name was Sudeya. She had already heard about the fire that destroyed Koshi's home and everything that happened afterward. However, she felt upset because Koshi had never contacted her to explain what had been going on. Suteya admitted that she had been very worried about him. After saying that, she quickly walked away. Suteya was Koshi's classmate and she tended to be easily irritated. The two of them had been friends since they were in kindergarten. After that brief encounter, Suteya quietly regretted the way she had reacted. She wondered why she could not simply express her concern in a calm and straightforward way like most people. Koshi approached her and admitted that he was at fault. He sincerely apologized and explained that his life had been extremely busy lately. However, Suteya continued to ignore him. Koshi began to worry that she might truly be angry with him. He realized that he should have borrowed the dormitory phone earlier and contacted Suteya to let her know what had happened. Feeling guilty, Koshi even considered telling Suteya everything that had happened during the past few weeks. However, he suddenly wondered whether it was a good idea to explain about the goddess dormitory. After all, the dormitory was filled with unique residents, and many unusual situations often happened there. Lost in those thoughts, Koshi suddenly reacted loudly without realizing it, which startled everyone in the classroom. The teacher immediately asked whether there was something wrong with Koshi's book. Embarrassed, Koshi quickly replied that everything was fine. His face turned red as he thought that it might be better to leave out some details. Because of that, he decided that he needed to talk to Tsudeya properly after class ended. Unfortunately, during the break time, Koshi became busy chatting with his other classmates. As a result, he never found the right moment to talk with Tsudeya. When the final bell rang, Koshi prepared to go and find her. However, his teacher suddenly approached him and said that he had already heard about everything that had happened to Koshi from one of his relatives. It turned out that the relative the teacher was referring to was Mineru. The teacher kindly offered his support and said that he would gladly help if Koshi ever needed assistance. Koshi thanked him sincerely before quickly leaving the classroom to catch up with Tsudeya. Koshi called out to her and tried to start a conversation, but Tsudeya continued to ignore him. Desperate to stop her for a moment, Koshi reached out and held her hand. Tsudeya looked annoyed and firmly asked him to let go. Right after that, she ran away. Koshi realized that he had handled the situation poorly. He admitted to himself that his behavior toward Tsudeya had not been considerate. At that moment, Tsudeya was sitting alone on the rooftop of the school. She began to blame herself, thinking that she had only made things worse for Koshi during a time when he was already dealing with so many difficulties. Tsudeya also had a physical condition that made her more sensitive to warmth than most people. She often felt uncomfortable with warm objects, hot weather, or even the natural warmth of another person's body. This sensitivity was actually one of the reasons why she had been able to become friends with Koshi in the first place. Her thoughts drifted back to the time when their friendship first began. Back when they were in kindergarten together, the children were playing a traditional game called Hana Ichimonmi. The students happily sang and held hands while playing together in the schoolyard. However, Tsudeya chose to sit alone and watch them from a distance. She imagined how uncomfortable it must feel to hold hands with everyone like that, hands becoming sweaty, sticky, and warm under the sun. She could not imagine how hot it would feel to play outside in that weather. Noticing that Tsudeya was sitting by herself, Koshi kindly approached her and invited her to join the game. Unfortunately, Tsudeya refused. She explained that she disliked holding hands with other people because the warmth made her skin itch. Holding hands for too long also made her feel restless and dizzy. A moment later, Koshi suddenly ran into the classroom. Their teacher's voice could be heard asking what he was doing while he searched through the freezer for some ice. The teacher wondered why he needed the ice in the first place. After cooling his hands, Koshi hurried back to Tsudeya. He gently placed both of his cool palms against her cheeks. He had done that so she could feel comfortable with his touch. Koshi then asked whether that felt better. Tsudeya quietly nodded. Seeing that she was more comfortable, Koshi once again invited her to play with him. Tsudeya was surprised that Koshi had shown such thoughtful consideration toward her. From that moment on, their friendship began to grow. Tsudeya's face turned red as she remembered that childhood moment with Koshi. She could still clearly recall what happened afterward. Once Koshi's hands returned to their normal temperature, she got upset and pushed him away. Even now, she still remembered the strange feeling she had when Koshi touched her face. Serene had never really understood Tsudeya's behavior. Tsudeya often acted the opposite of how she truly felt. Even so, Koshi never left her side. To Tsudeya, Koshi had always been someone who quietly protected her. That alone made her very happy, and deep down she wanted to do something in return for him someday. Suddenly, in the present, Koshi's cold hands gently touched Tsudeya's cheeks again. He lightly scolded her for being careless enough to stay on the school rooftop even though she could not handle the heat very well. Tsudeya's face flushed as she asked why his hands were so cold. Koshi quickly apologized for touching her face. It turned out he had brought a piece of ice to help cool her down. Finding the ice had not been easy. He had even asked Mineru to help him search the dormitory refrigerator for it. Tsudeya then asked who Mineru was. Koshi calmly explained everything, and the two of them continued their conversation in the student infirmary. He talked about his current life and how he was working as the dorm mother at the goddess dormitory. After hearing that story, Tsudeya immediately asked Koshi to take her there because she wanted to see the place herself. Koshi refused. He felt that Tsudeya was going too far, especially since she had not fully recovered yet. However, Tsudeya stubbornly insisted on going. Koshi kept trying to stop her, and during the struggle they both lost their balance and fell onto a bed. Their faces ended up very close to each other, creating an awkward and tense moment. Koshi quickly apologized again, clearly embarrassed. Instead of getting angry, Tsudeya suddenly grabbed his hand and said that she wanted to become someone Koshi could rely on. Both of their faces turned bright red, but only a moment later, overwhelmed with embarrassment, Tsudeya suddenly kicked Koshi away, sending him tumbling off the bed. She felt extremely embarrassed and could not believe that she had reacted that way again. Later that afternoon, Koshi wondered why Tsudeya kept following him. He explained that he only lived in a women's dormitory and insisted that there was nothing special about it. Sudeya suddenly asked why he looked so guilty while saying that. Hearing that, Koshi quickly denied it. According to Suteya, there should not be any problem if she simply wanted to see where he lived. Koshi then admitted to himself that there was no reason to feel guilty. After all, he was just doing his job as the dorm mother and helping take care of the residents. However, his imagination suddenly wandered to the residents relaxing in the dormitory bath area. The unexpected thought startled him so much that he shouted in panic. At that moment, Koshi began to think that it might be better if Suteya did not visit the dormitory after all. Hearing that only made Sudeya even more suspicious that Koshi might be hiding something there. Koshi quickly denied it again and insisted that he had absolutely nothing to feel guilty about. Just then, an emergency alarm suddenly rang from inside the dormitory. Once again, Mineru had made a mistake during one of her experiments, accidentally creating a dangerous gas. As usual, Mineru and Frey rushed out of the dormitory building in a hurry. When they stepped outside, they ran straight into Koshi. Both of them greeted him with bright smiles, clearly happy to see him return. They also became curious about the girl standing beside him. Meanwhile, Koshi and Sudeya simply stood there in silence, completely stunned by Mineru and Frey's chaotic entrance. That day, Koshi invited Sudeya to visit the dormitory where he lived. Suteya's face showed clear confusion when she saw the residents there. Koshi then introduced Sudeya to Athena and explained that Suteya was someone fairly normal. Athena felt puzzled by that kind of introduction. According to Koshi, being normal was actually the best thing someone could be in that dormitory. At that moment, Mineru and Frey walked over and commented that a normal personality sounded incredibly boring. Frey seemed curious about Suteya and moved closer as if she wanted to touch her, but Koshi quickly stopped her. He explained that Suteya did not like being touched because of medical considerations. Suteya immediately complained that Koshi should not say something like that. Feeling annoyed, she kicked him hard. Koshi quickly apologized to her. Mineru and Frey then realized that this seemed to be the kind of interaction middle school students sometimes used to show concern for each other. Suteya's face turned bright red as she felt embarrassed for doing something impulsive again. Mineru looked extremely interested in Suteya's behavior. She quietly told Athena that Athena might have a strong rival to deal with. Athena did not understand what Mineru meant. Frey even encouraged Athena not to lose to Koshi's childhood friend. Athena firmly clarified that she did not see Koshi that way and felt more like his older sister figure. Mineru responded that a big sister-type character might actually have a good chance. Suddenly, Kiria and Serene appeared. Kiria confidently claimed that she was the one most suited to be Koshi's big sister, which immediately made Athena protest strongly. The two of them started arguing over who deserved that role. Out of nowhere, Suteya raised her voice in frustration. She questioned whether the dormitory environment was truly good for Koshi and declared that she would judge it herself. Everyone was surprised by her sudden statement. Koshi then invited Sudeya to see his room. Sudeya quietly observed everything inside while carefully examining every corner. After a moment, she commented that Koshi's room was very clean. Koshi looked a little embarrassed and explained that it probably looked clean simply because he did not own many things. Athena added that Koshi always cleaned the dormitory very well and that his cooking was also delicious. Hearing that made Suteya look even more irritated. Koshi asked whether Suteya wanted to inspect every room in the dormitory. Still looking annoyed, Suteya said that Koshi should actually be grateful because she was giving him a chance to make up for his mistakes. Mineru then suggested that they move on to the next room. Mineru invited Sudeya to visit her room. Koshi hesitated and asked if it was safe, since there had been a toxic gas leak earlier. Mineru confidently replied that the gas had already cleared. However, when the door opened, it turned out that the gas was still there. Koshi immediately asked Mineru to close the door again. He explained that Mineru was a researcher and that many of her experiments unfortunately did not go as planned. Hearing this reminded Serene of a rumor circulating at school about someone known as the Poison Lady from Seikon University. Suteya began to suspect that Mineru might be a dangerous person. After that, Frey invited Sudeya to see her room. Suteya was surprised to find many costumes inside. Frey explained that she loved cosplay and enjoyed both dressing up herself and styling other people. She also liked sewing, which made her room look almost like a costume shop. Frey excitedly showed off one of her newest outfits. Sudeya stared sharply at the costume. Frey became even more enthusiastic because she believed it would suit Suteya perfectly. Frey then tried to persuade Sudeya to try it on and began helping her get ready for the outfit. Sudeya clearly resisted and tried to pull away. Seeing the situation getting out of hand, Athena quickly stepped in and lightly knocked Frey on the head to stop her. Koshi could only watch in disbelief as the situation became more chaotic. After things settled down, Athena formally introduced herself to Sudeya and invited her to see her room. Sudaya commented that Atena's room looked very normal. Unexpectedly, Atena said that the comment sounded a bit boring. It turned out that this was actually the first time Koshi had seen Atena's room as well. He said the room felt very comfortable and had a pleasant fragrance. Hearing Koshi praise it like that made Atena blush. When Sudaya noticed Atena's shy expression, she somehow felt even more irritated. Kiriya then approached Atena and announced that it was finally her turn. She once again introduced herself as Koshi's big sister figure. They then visited Kiriya's room. Kiriya explained that she came from a family that loved martial arts, and even though her personality was far from perfect, she really enjoyed reading shoujo manga. She told Sudaya that she was welcome to visit any time to borrow manga. At that moment, Sudaya seemed to lower her guard a little. Kiriya tried to recommend a manga to her. Unfortunately, when she opened it, a romantic scene appeared on the page. Kiriya's face instantly turned bright red and she reacted awkwardly by punching the wall in embarrassment. Sudaya looked startled and began to feel that the dormitory might actually be a rather dangerous place. Not long after that, Serene arrived and offered Sudaya a rice cake. Serene explained that the taste and texture might help her relax and forget whatever problems she was dealing with. Unfortunately, Serene soon realized that the rice cake had already expired. At that point, Sudaya felt completely overwhelmed with frustration and talked about wanting to tear the place down. Koshi quickly stepped in and tried to calm her down. That night, Mineru suggested that Sudaya stay over at the dormitory. It meant that everyone would be spending the night under the same roof. Koshi asked whether anyone minded the idea. Atena responded that everyone there would gladly do anything for Koshi's childhood friend. Hearing that, Koshi apologized if he had caused trouble for everyone. Mineru then wondered which room Sudaya would stay in. Sudaya chose Atena's room. Later that evening, Atena prepared a futon for her guest. While doing so, she noticed that Sudaya kept looking at her. Atena wondered why she was being watched like that. She figured that the sleepover might be a good chance to get closer, so she decided to make the night enjoyable. Atena approached Sudaya and asked what Koshi had been like when he was younger. In Atena's eyes, Koshi seemed like a kind, responsible, and dependable person. Sudaya found the question a little strange and asked why Atena wanted to know. She then remarked that she had assumed she would know everything about Koshi, yet somehow he was now working as the caretaker of a dorm full of people she had never met before. Because of that, Sudaya asked what kind of relationship everyone there had with Koshi. Atena was clearly surprised by the question. At the same time, Koshi was relaxing in the bath. He hoped that Atena and Sudaya would get along well. After thinking about it for a moment, he decided that he probably did not need to worry so much, although the situation still made his head feel a bit dizzy. Back in the room, Atena asked Sudaya why she had questioned everyone's relationship with Koshi. Meanwhile, Koshi finished bathing and stepped out of the bathroom. At that exact moment, Kiriya was heading in to wash up as well.